Welcome back to the Lean Change Management Podcast. Today I'm talking with Koch Gonzalez, who's the CEO of Sociocracy Consulting Group and coordinator of Sociocracy for All. Jerry, welcome to the show and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Jason. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. What shall I say about myself? My background is really as a social change activist for many years. And what I cared most about was how do we bring more equality, more sense of equality, everyone's voice mattering into this world. So when I encountered sociocracy, it seemed like an even better system than what I was thinking about before. So that's basically how I fell in love with it. I don't know what else. I live in Amherst, Massachusetts. And as you said in your introduction, I work with these two groups. Sociocracy Consulting Group does consulting for implementations and some training of sociocracy. Sociocracy for All does similar things, but is more oriented towards the nonprofit sector or for people who can't necessarily afford full-fledged consulting. And we do a lot of videos that are online. We do a lot of classes, online classes, etc., to make learning about sociocracy accessible. And I can maybe just say, as by way of introduction, for those who don't know, so sociocracy, that word was invented at the same time as the word sociology was invented, same French philosopher, Auguste Comte. So pronunciation, is often a challenge with that word, sociocracy. So think of sociology and democracy and put those together, sociocracy. Another word for sociocracy that we use is dynamic governance, which maybe says a little bit more for people, in terms of English language. Governance, that's what this is about. Dynamic meaning it's changeable, it's movable, it's not set in stone. The word sociocracy also, you think of it as ocracy as governance and socio as the associates, the socios. So governance by those who work together, as opposed to sort of the more anonymous democracy of voting for people, or autocracy when somebody's telling you what to do, etc.
Excellent. Yeah, my first experience was I saw Dan Lefebvre speak about dynamic governance at one of the Agile conferences. Would have been probably 2012, somewhere around there. So the limit of my experience is with the theory, what I learned from that talk and some reading. And what I took away mostly was the idea of the overlapping circles as being the main difference, that people are elected to lead a circle, and the circles, the way that the communication flows is that it's not linear by nature, but the overlapping circles is what carries messages to different areas of the organization. So the people who might be impacted by what a higher circle is talking about actually have a say in creating that environment. So that's the limit of my experience. Is that in a nutshell fairly close, or do you have a better definition?
Well, that's close. Let me, I guess, frame this out. I think of sociocracy as essentially having three core aspects. One is what you were just talking about, the organizational structure, which is people are working in teams that we call circles, and all the circles are linked to each other. If you think in traditional hierarchical model, then they are linked from the very sort of shop floor level, if you will, to the board of directors level. So each circle has is operating at its level of abstraction or its level of work. The grassroots or the shop floor level being very concrete, doing something very, very specific, whereas you go all the way up to the board level, they're doing something much more abstract. They're thinking in terms of 5-year, 10-year plans. Are we staying true to the mission and vision of the organization? That level. And if you think of the hierarchy, you can also turn that around. Instead of thinking of higher level circles and lower level circles, you can think of just a different language, more broadly focused circles and more narrowly focused circles. And that gets us away sometimes from the images of power over that top-down hierarchy brings. The linkage of the circles means that everyone really has voice and influence through the entire organization. The decisions, second element is that decisions within any circle are made by consent. And consent is different than consensus, and it's obviously different from majority rule or Robert's Rules of Order kind of majority rule. The consent, the question that we ask is there any objection to this proposal?
Mhm.
So the bias is towards action. Let's try something. Let's not wait for perfection. Consensus often kind of brings us to the place that people are waiting for the perfect solution. So here we're going for, is this good enough to try?
Mhm.
Safe, safe enough to try so that we can get some feedback from our trying and then, revise, amend, change the policy as according to what we've experienced.
Mm.
So circle structure, consent decision making, and the third element, which I just kind of alluded to, is the feedback cycles. What is the learning, what is the evolutionary learning dynamic of the organization?
Mm.
So we build feedback into everything. Every meeting gets evaluated, every process can get evaluated, every policy can get evaluated. What's going well, what needs to be improved here. Okay, we go through the lead, do, measure, cycle. So you're doing it, you measure the results, then you take a new leading, from that and apply it to the next cycle of what you're, of whatever it is that you're doing.
Mhm.
So those to me are the three kind of core elements of sociocracy.
Okay. So when you see organizations that want to adopt this, or when they're approaching you to help with it, what's the underlying reason? Are they looking for a way to have better communication, better decision making? Do they see it as an organizational design and structure model? Or do they just hear the word and they think, I want to learn a little bit more about this? Why are organizations
Yeah,
trying to use this approach?
not many people come just because they hear the word.
Okay.
Although if they hear the word often enough from different circles, they start going, okay, what is this that I should be paying attention to because so many people are kind of mentioning it.
Hmm.
People who are attracted to sociocracy are attracted to how can we actually embody a more egalitarian structure that still is efficient and effective, that doesn't get lost in, you know, like the some of the, I mean, I used to teach consensus, so I love the principles of consensus, which is similar to the principles of consent, that no one can be ignored. But the danger in consensus is, does that mean that we're going to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning working this out, and whoever's still left in the room gets the win?
Hmm.
There's too much debate in typical consensus practices. What sociocracy brings is a more clear structure of decision making. Uh, it changes the bar, or the consciousness of what do we need to do to make this decision. That basically what we need is something that will allow us to do the next step and get feedback. So if something seems scary, then you can scale it down and, okay, let's just try this out for 1 month instead of trying this out for 5 years.
Mm.
Try 1 month and try it out. So your question was, why do people come to this? Is they're looking for a way to act out on some of their values. I'd like to see a more egalitarian world. How do I do this in my company, in my co-housing community, in my association, etc.?
Okay. So my world is helping organizations with agile and lean practices, and much of the time they underestimate the effect that has on the culture and the structure of the organization. They see it as, we want to bring in a better way to execute this project. So I could imagine that with the ideas of the overlapping circles, you could apply it in a project sense, and maybe that's not why it's intended. So I was curious if if you look at organizations in the banking sector or telecom, or any more kind of overly structured hierarchical organizations, do they see it just as a process model, or are they kind of intentionally wanting to make a shift in their culture and move more towards purpose?
Yeah. There, again, people come from all different directions. Sometimes they're just narrowly focused on, I'd like to have our teams be more effective. Um, but for me, inherent in sociocracy is a fairly revolutionary idea, as simple as everyone's voice matters.
Hmm.
Which means if you're really fully operating as a sociocratic organization, there are certain decisions that are pretty unlikely to be made. It's pretty unlikely that a truly sociocratic organization would be choosing to be paying, extremely high benefits to the CEO.
Hmm.
It'd be extremely unlikely that a sociocratic organization would make a decision like, oh yeah, let's just move our company to, to another country
Hmm.
where labor is cheaper, because the workers are part of the organization and they're not going to want to move the organization. The workers are living in a community. Uh, they're not going to want to have the impact of their community of having this company leave town. Workers in that context are not going to be wanting to make junk. They're going to be wanting to make something that gives them a sense of value of what they're doing. Um, so the products of that company are going to likely to be things that reflect the values of the people who are working in it, or at least shifting towards that. As you realize, oh, we're doing this kind of thing and we don't like it because it's not really that good for the planet. Let's start shifting, and we can make those decisions. Um, the challenge, so truly, kind of truly hierarchical organizations where the leaders want to maintain control and power are not likely to be interested in sociocracy ultimately when they fully understand it.
Right, right.
On the other hand, investors may be very interested in sociocratic companies because sociocratic companies would be ones where the workers have an investment in their work. They really care about what they're doing. They know their voices matter. And so that means less turnover in the business, um, less sick time. Everybody's just much more invested.
Hmm.
Economically speaking, in a fully sociocratic company, um, the workers would get both a fixed share of return, whatever their pay is, a salary, which in this context would still be related to the standards of salaries in the world, and they would get a variable rate of return, a share of the profit, if you will. How well is the company doing?
Hmm.
The investors, if there are investors in a company, they would also get a fixed rate of return, like you would do with loans. We know, okay, it's a 3% or 4%, whatever that fixed rate is, and a variable rate of return, depending on how well the company's doing. So the workers want the investors to be happy and put money in to make the work go well. The investors want the workers to be happy and doing their work effectively because that means better return. It's a win-win for everybody, as opposed to an us-them between labor and management, or investors and investors, management, labor. And it is a culture change. And so I think that's what you were referring to also about introducing Agile, uh, that there, like in Agile, right? So everyone's voice matters. You want to get feedback quickly. You're treating each other as equals in a process. And that starts having implications for the whole culture of the organization.
Hmm.
And I think there are challenges on both ends of those who are traditionally in power. Have to take a deep breath in terms of accepting sharing more power than they have done before.
Hmm.
And on the other side, those who have not had power also have to take a deep breath and take on more sense of responsibility than
Hmm.
they might have had before. So there's been some, we can experience some resistance on both ends of that. And implementations of sociocracy have come from both ends, from a CEO saying, oh, this is good, let's try this out. And so it kind of rolls out top down. And it also sometimes comes just bottom up. Some unit in an organization starts experimenting, and then it spreads from there.
Hmm.
One example we had, it was a high school, and it was the high school students governance system that adopted sociocracy, and from there it spread to the administration. Whereas in another school, it was in the administration, and then from there it spread to everyone else.
Right. So mentioning schools and nonprofits as well, does it seem that the cultures are more predisposed to a more collaborative social way of working already, and they need a little bit of structure to figure out what's missing?
Uh, Yeah, those, sociocracy is most easily adoptable by organizations that already share some values,
Hmm.
particularly the values of equality, of listening to everyone. So it's not necessarily a public school because they are so bureaucratized, it's really hard for them to be dynamic,
Hmm.
uh, but a private school that has those kind of values.
Right.
I live in a cooperative housing community, co-housing community here in Amherst. Co-housing communities, by their nature, people are here because they want to seek more cooperative living. So there's a sense of shared values that makes it more likely, more open to adopting sociocracy. I think organizations that are interested in agile already, those that are clear about what that means are more likely to be interested in sociocracy.
Right.
Startups, where the founders have that kind of ethos, uh, those are more open to sociocracy.
Right. Yeah, I find a lot of the times going into organizations, um, that's really what they're asking for. They're looking for a better way to make decisions, and they want a more co-creative way to run their organization as opposed to just being through the hierarchy. And in my world, at least, they see agile as the tool to do it, and then they miss out on that other piece. So they miss out on things like, you hear a lot in the agile community that leaders need to be servant leaders and they need to stand back and let the team self-organize, but that's the extent of it. There's no, how far, a friend of mine likes to say, how far back should I stand? 3 meters, 5 meters? There's no substance in there. So I think, at least from the experiences I have, I kind of go in with a stance of, uh, have we talked about how we decide things? So really strip away the agile noise and the process models, because that's the easy part. You can Google that and figure that stuff out, no problem. But if we haven't had a meaningful conversation around how we make decisions, who decides what our risk tolerance is,
Yeah,
agile is just going to be another PMO bunch of checkboxes on your status reports.
yeah, and it can be a little bubble inside of a company that gets popped.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
once people realize that it has implications they don't like for the rest of the company, they go, "Oh,
yeah. We like to call that the Eye of Sauron effect. So you get a team that's kind of working in the bubble, and then the Eye of Sauron notices it and kind of destroys it because it's too counter to um, what the overall organizational culture is like by the time that bubble has to start poking into the organizational boundaries.
right, right, exactly."
Mhm. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges that organizations have? Because one of the questions I had was, when people are being elected to lead the circles, what happens if the person who is elected is not a manager, and there's a manager in that lower circle who's not the actual leader of that circle? Does that happen, or how does
Well,
that
let me just talk a little bit about the nature of circles. If you think of the traditional, if you take the little diagram of the hierarchy of an organization, with the little boxes that go down, which again you can turn sideways. Um, so you've got a traditional hierarchical structure. What sociocracy does is is turn the departments or the units into circles, so that within a particular department or particular unit, when they're making policy, they make policy as equals. So the manager and the staff of that unit are all making decisions by consent. That circle selects a delegate by consent in an open process, and that's a whole. The selection process is a very interesting and I think beautiful process in sociocracy. That delegate is selected to serve on the next higher or broader circle, and they sit there as equals in making policy choices, including the decision about who the next leader of that subunit would be. So every circle, if they're linked, they're double linked. Every circle's got a leader and a delegate. The leader selected from the next more broad circle to the more narrow circle, the delegate from the more narrow circle to the more broad circle. So there's always that double link. That allows, that's what allows in a sense of equality and voice, because it's not just the leader saying things, and it's not just how's your department going, and the leader says, well, great.
Mhm.
There's another voice there that would give more truth, more a full picture of what's going on. It reduces the sense of covering for yourself that can happen in a simple hierarchy.
uh,
So if a circle is choosing a new leader for the next unit, the next unit that's more focused, that is the manager.
Okay.
So there's not a separation between there's a leader of a circle and there's a leader of the department who's the manager. They're the same person.
Okay.
What can be different is that every unit, every circle can select a facilitator who is basically just a process leader for the meetings, not a leader of the department. That could be somebody who's different than the manager leader.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay. So when organizations get started with this, are they, as far as bringing the change in, training people about what this is, creating their structures, do they treat this like a change project, if you will? Because a lot of what I see in the change world is Agile's brought in and a handful of people are assigned as the Agile change team, and they create the process and they train people and they push it out, and then they hit the wall of resistance because they're pushing too hard. Um, do people take a different approach because the culture is it sounds like it's already primed to work that way? So how do they implement?
well, I wouldn't. I guess I'd say it's in some ways similar to any change process, and again, how it gets implemented in any organization varies so differently according to the culture and the nature of each organization. But yes, there would often be a change team. Who's their core group that's going to think about how this is rolled out. It's important. It's important. Training is important. Having as many people in the organization have at least a basic understanding of sociocracy is key, and having at least a subset of folks become really good internal experts is important. Um, facilitation is a skill, and sociocratic facilitation is a particular form. So it's useful to have that skill and to then coach that skill in among all the different units in the organization. Um, so yes, I think of that as an organizational change process that can be led through a team. And again, with all the focus on feedback and being adaptive, that as you try things, you're also getting feedback from what people are experiencing, and you keep changing it.
Hmm.
I think of sociocracy as kind of an empty method that then gets filled in with the particulars of the specific organization.
Mm, right,
So look a little different. There's a pattern, but then how you fill that pattern depends upon your organization.
right.
And it is a culture change, so it takes a while for people to feel differently. One of the key little things that we do in sociocracy is rounds in a meeting. In a meeting, you just, okay, let's, here's the proposal on the table, or here's this idea, let's go around and hear from each person. That means that's different than what often happens in meetings where the subject is just put on the table, and the people who speak a lot will speak a lot, and they will keep repeating themselves because they want to prove that by repeating themselves they'll win over other people.
Hmm.
And the people who are silent, they stay silent, and we may not hear what wisdom they carry.
Hmm.
We may not have a sense of what's going on in the team because we really haven't heard from everybody. So circles are a way of supporting the equivalence of every voice.
Hmm.
And once every voice can speak up, the people who speak a lot will start learning to speak less, will start learning to stop over talking over others. The people who speak less will find that there's more space for them to speak, and they don't have to worry about being immediately interrupted, or if they can't take 10 seconds to think, then they have no way to have a voice before, they can't take 10 seconds to speak to think before they speak.
Hmm.
Those folks who operate that way often don't have a voice in meetings. They think about it, things afterwards.
Right.
So that sense of creating a culture change within the group can take a while, can take months,
Hmm.
until it's like, oh, now I get it. This does feel differently. I have that sense that my voice is valued. And knowing that my voice is valued also means that I have more space to sit back and value the voices of others. This is much more of a sense of collaborative. This is a team. We can start, given that the membership of the team is fairly steady, that also means that we can start learning each other's patterns. and go, okay, when this person speaks, we let them speak a little bit longer because they're not as linear in the way they speak as somebody else.
Mhm.
You start adapting to who you are as a group and giving support for everyone to be able to find their voice in it.
Yeah, I imagine it takes a while for that, for the level of safety to reach a point where they can have those conversations. I like to use uh, something from the core protocols called safety check. One team I was working with, it's as an outside facilitator, sometimes it's pretty obvious to come in and see a dynamic that a team can't see. And we had started this team off by doing a safety check. So a week long sort of team building and working session we started off with from 0 to 5. How safe do you feel to speak up? And made it an anonymous poll on stickies, and then that allowed us to have the conversation around, well, what's getting us stuck? Why are some people a 5? Why are some people a 2? So what's happening there? But not trying to push them too hard, because it's difficult to force people to want to speak up, especially introverts. So I'm kind of a self recognized introvert as well, and a lot of the times it's um, working with extroverts. It's not wanting to jump in to be rude sometimes. So sometimes I won't speak up just for that
Just
factor.
that,
But
yeah.
definitely the safety component is something that I find is very important. Agile, any type of organizational change or even project work, having being feeling free to speak up, it's very important.
And round create that potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like you say, there's introverts and extroverts, and then there's gender dynamics, race dynamics, class dynamics. We all bring whoever we are and whatever has set us up to kind of have a dominating voice or a receding voice. And what I like about sociocracy and rounds in particular, that it tends to bring us all into the same context.
Hmm.
So it starts equalizing and valuing everyone's voice. People can then learn from that experience and learn and grow.
Hmm. I always find when I'm doing work overseas, in Europe, there seems to be more acceptance of cultural diversity, because I think they're exposed to it more. You have people who've come from different countries that tend to work together more, which is interesting. So the level of conversations always seem to be quite different, right? They can be very vocal about, well, he's your typical structured, rigid, quiet Finn. They can say things like that. In North America, we can't get away with that. We have to more rely on understanding those differences. But I find it's some teams have a struggle dealing with that diversity. So hopefully this does give them a better way of being able to have those deep conversations.
Yeah, when we've been asked, is sociocracy kind of a middle class thing that other people necessarily wouldn't understand? And what's interesting is that the largest sociocratic organization in the world is Children's Parliament of India.
Hmm.
So we've got 6 to 18-year-olds sitting in circles of 30 in their very local neighborhood, and then it's also has the circle of the neighborhood representatives, and so on, has a number of different levels, and these young people are able to operate, to have to select leaders, to set directions for their work that they want to have. And some of them are not literate. They're able to do that even without having to read and write. So it's a lot of there's a lot of inherent capacity that this I think this model can bring.
Hmm. I think it really brings back the human connection. We get so focused in our organizations on boxes and charts and process, and we forget how humankind has evolved over the last tens of thousands of years through storytelling and through interaction and through negotiation and conversation. And that's been a lot of my world the last year and a bit, is focusing more on the work of Herbert Bloomer, who talked about social movements and how that happens. And I think change in our organizations um, happens in much the same way. So stripping away a lot of that noise and thinking,
Yeah.
it can be as simple as getting people in a room and explaining basic respect for people and conversations and consent, I think can get people unstuck. Do you find there is a particular sticking point when people are thinking about implementing sociocracy, and how are they getting over that?
Well, I wanted to step back and just say something about feedback. because what you were talking, organizations are built on relationships, and we're not used to giving each other feedback, or electoral process is giving feedback in a ballot box, which is not, which is not detailed. It's not enough information. So ending a meeting and going, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? What could be improved in what we just did, from both product perspective, but also from process perspective? You start gathering feedback. So it's important for us to, and this is one of the challenges for us, to building up the courage to be able to say, it's real frustrating for me sitting in this meeting and having you, whoever that is, be cross talking, in the middle of rounds, that from my experience, I got frustrated, sense of loss of efficiency. I couldn't really hear everybody's voice. And so that's feedback. And if this happens, over several number of meetings, well, that person who's been doing that cross-talking clearly is going to start needing to either shift, or the group is going to have to address how that person operates in the group, and say, okay, this is not acceptable. What do we do here? We'd love to support you in being an effective member. Would you be willing to do some training, or do some stuff so that you could become a more effective member of the group? And if need be, if that's not possible, then it's the possibility of removing the person from the group, whether you're, in a sense, quote unquote, firing somebody in a paid context, or in a volunteer group, saying, we need to keep working towards our aim, and this is your presence is not helping us.
Hmm.
You need to have that choice. It's not that we would want to do that very often. We're always looking for, how do we develop, so how do we develop the company, the organization, the individual?
And I imagine for some people that this way of working is just not a fit for their personality. So they might even opt out. Maybe they'll try it for X period of time and opt out, or maybe they just don't want any part of it once it starts. Because I see that in Agile a lot, is
Yeah.
people with more of a structured, process-driven background see Agile as chaos, and they tend to opt out fairly quickly. Does the same thing happen when you see this brought in, or not as much?
I think it's, I would agree. Personality, some folks are not a fit at this time. Um, we've all been raised, we've grown up into who we are with whatever history has brought us in. And for some, they're listening to everybody. They just want to get things done,
Yeah.
just do their own thing. So yeah, there's a place for them to do their own thing over there. Um, there's spaces in this world for that.
Hmm.
My hope and vision is that over time, as more people feel safe within the context of collaboration, that'll start shifting.
Hmm.
That both the, from both ends, the people who tend to hold back and the people who tend to over participate or like to just lead,
Hmm.
they'll find that there is wisdom in the group, and it's not so totally frustrating once the level of skill is increasing.
Hmm.
Um,
So,
the process of learning that happens. We had one person in a circle that I was in who did a lot of interrupting, cross talking, and over time, this person got it and learned to participate in the circle. But then she also became a leader of another circle, and then I heard from that circle that, oh, she is so rigid about always doing everything in rounds. So the person who was the interrupter in our circle learned well enough, but then became almost too rigid in applying that. I think that happens a lot when people learn something new. They become almost like police about it, and then when you mature about it, you become more flexible. And it's like, okay, what is it that really honors the participation of the people in the direction of trying to do the work, the aim that we have in our particular organization?
yeah, I think people generally are after the same thing in their organizations. They just express themselves differently. So
Yeah.
some people are a little more loosey goosey and can feel their way through it, and other people need more and can take the structure and the rigidity too far, especially in team dynamics. If you've got birds of a feather happening, so if you've got too many people that have similar temperaments, then you don't get that natural conflict that can be a good thing. But we all just need to understand that everybody needs something different, and how do we respect that? So, as we get into the wrap up, tell the audience how they can learn more about you and the work that you do in sociocracy in general. And then what have you got going on over the next few months?
Okay. So I guess first of all, people can go to websites, sociocracyconsulting.com. That's the website for the Sociocracy Consulting Group, and sociocracyforall.org. That's the website for Sociocracy for All. Um, the Sociocracy Consulting Group has a mailing list, so you can go to the website and sign up on the mailing list. We do, for the general public, we do online classes on the foundations of sociocracy and facilitating sociocracy. So if you go to the website, you'll see the upcoming classes that are being taught online for that. Sociocracy Consulting Group also does in-person open workshops at times, and does, of course, directed implementations in organizations, that we contract with. So you can find all of information about all of that on their website. Sociocracy for All also does online classes. We have, in a sense, I would say, several different levels that we do. The main thing that we're currently doing is something called a Sociocracy Leadership Training. We can talk about sociocracy, you can even go to a good workshop, but it's hard to really understand it unless you live it. So sociocracy leadership training is a 9 or 10 week process where you get to be, we create a pop-up organization, a real organization that only exists for a short period of time, where you get to live sociocracy by making decisions sociocratically within that context. It has an organizational structure with several levels, so you can witness that. You get some training from myself and my training partner, and you actually, the work that is done is to produce information about sociocracy for the general public. So I really love this training model. We are in the second cycle. We're in the middle of a second cycle right now. We're starting a third cycle, February 24th, 2017. And then another one in April, another one in the fall. So again, people can go to sociocracyforall.org to find out more about that. The
Excellent.
current cycle has 4 subgroups, 6 people each in it. And one group is focusing on developing more case studies. There are a lot of people trying out sociocracy, but we don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And people are always asking us, well, who is doing this and who in our field is doing this? So that subgroup has to figure out how they're going to work together to generate, several case studies of sociocracy in action. Another group will put on an online event, like a webinar. And so they need to decide what kind of a webinar, what's the topic, how is it going to be organized, etc. And then they go ahead and put it on. A third group is working on frequently asked questions, which may be going into creating a wiki, where tons of information about sociocracy is available to the public. And the fourth group is working, what we call broadcast circle, is working to bring sociocracy into particular sectors, like bringing sociocracy more into the agile world, or sociocracy more into the permaculture world, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I would certainly encourage people who want to get at that level of, really having a sense of having lived the experience to try one of those programs out.
Mm-hmm.
We're also developing now, because that's a little bit higher bar to get in. It requires a certain level of commitment. To a lesser commitment is a study group format. We've now got a 6-session study group format. We're still in the testing stage, but probably in another month or so, it'll become public. So anybody with at least some experience with sociocracy could then gather a group of, some folks in their company or their friends, and go through, a 6-session series that is kind of guided. Beyond that, Sociocracy for All does webinars. Those are all posted. I think I'm doing one coming up in a couple of weeks on, what is the topic? I can't remember if it's disruptive, dealing with disruptive behavior or things like that,
Mm-hmm.
within a meeting. What else? And there are also communities of practice for those who've got more experience.
Mm-hmm.
Once people are practicing sociocracy or trying to teach it, then there are support systems for those kinds of folks.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're a busy guy.
Busy. Yeah, busy. And the other guest resource that's just out there is all the videos on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
There's both basic introduction videos, and there's also little tiny snippets, like the frequently asked questions, which are just like 90 seconds long to 25-minute long videos. So the channel is right now the channel is Jerry Koch Gonzalez with a hyphen between Koch and Gonzalez. So you go to YouTube, Jerry Koch Gonzalez, and you'll see all those. Or you can just on YouTube search for Sociocracy.
Excellent.
And Twitter account at Sociocracy with the number 4 all. Sociocracy 4 all. That's our Twitter's pretty active account. There's a lot of little bits that go out through that.
Excellent. So for those listening on the podcast, if you go to leanchange.org/podcasts, you can get references and links in the show notes. And then obviously for the people who are watching this on the new YouTube channel, you would have seen them down here at the bottom of the video as we were going through it. Jerry, this was great. This was a very pleasurable experience for me. I had a lot of fun, learned quite a bit. I'm glad you reached out. So hopefully this was good for you and fun as well.
I did one more little thing I forgot to say. So, some of my colleagues are more involved with agile work. I mean, I presented at Agile New England in January. My colleague John Buck is going to be in Agile 2017 in India, presenting about sociocracy. He and Jutta Eckstein are writing a book connecting sociocracy and agile.
Excellent. I know them both. I've met them both. I don't remember where I met John. It had to have been at one of the big Agile conferences as well, but I know I've been back and forth with him on email a few times as well. So, yeah, it is a small world.
Yeah, well, like-minded people connect. So let's keep doing that. Pleasure to be on your show, Jason.
Excellent. Thanks very much.